1889, 1890. And there were 5 African-American men who were highlighted in this edition of the yearbook. And some of them, as you can see up here, some are long-term employees of the university, and others were just fondly remembered as, quote, odd and picturesque characters. So some of them you'll know. Henry Martin, very well known here, the bell ringer, janitor of the rotunda. My Massachusetts just came out. That's going to happen from time to time. This is Dr. Fawcett, and in quotes, and a lot more research has been done on these individuals to reveal who they really are and the stories behind them. I can't do all of that today, but just to show you, this is in the yearbook. He's the janitor of the dissecting hall. This is John Twine, dispenser of kindling wood and purchaser of old clothes. His headstone is at Daughters of Zion Cemetery. And thank you to the hosts of this event, the preservers. John Twine's stone is there. Uncle Peter, again in quotes, handler and storyteller. And then Berkeley Bullock, a restaurant proprietor. And of course, I can't remember if Jean told me about this sketch or if I found this sketch. It doesn't really matter, but it's an important source. And of course, it's a problematic source. It's written in a time, and you'll see. I don't have to explain why it's problematic. All you have to do is sort of read their description of Berkeley Bullock. And I am going to read this along with you. Of the many odd and picturesque characters of the Negro race that are to be met with everywhere around the university, but that are now fast passing away before the superior intellectual culture and proud assertion of equal rights on the part of their descendants, Berkeley Bullock is one of the best known and most generally liked by the students. It would take the pen of a Thomas Nelson Page or a Joel Chandler Harris to do justice to the old man, to describe his quaint appearance and quainter ways. And just to sort of contextualize that, Joel Chandler Harris wrote about Uncle Remus, and Thomas Nelson Page was known for his work on social life in Old Virginia before the war. The students did not, at this point, 1890, they're 20 years old. They were born in 1870. Their understanding of antebellum life comes to them through the writings of Harris and Page. That's their understanding of the characters that they're likening Berkeley Bullock to. He's a medium-sized, weazened little man of perhaps 50, with bandy legs and stooping shoulders. His face is furrowed deep by the plow of time, not a little aided by care, in the shape of a large family and business, much crippled by that our newfangled restaurant over there. He had competition. He was a restaurant owner. He had competition. Berkeley is a silent man and rarely speaks unless spoken to, but when he does become talkative, it is the talk of the good old antebellum darky, not the polished small talk and chit-chat of the present generation of colored gentlemen. He is full of cornfield philosophy, reminiscences, folklore, and quaint observations on men and things, all so well and pithily expressed that it is well worth one's while to listen with attention to one of our best surviving representatives of the old plantation hand. So this is their caricature, their characterization of the man they know. It's a portrait that is obviously condescending, and yet at times presented as loving. He's remarkably honest. He's a kind and loving parent, a good friend, an earnest Christian. So there are many qualities that you can read through this and pull from it, that they see him as a person to be admired, but the caricature that they're creating does not match up with the figure that you will come to know, that we will come to know through the research on him. But this is another aspect of it, that he knows his place. So what they're contrasting here is the old Negro, the character of the old plantation hand, and the new Negro, the pushing, aspiring class of Negroes of the late 19th century. He well knows his place. He is never pushing, scorning with holy indignation the growing class of half-educated, aspiring Negroes of the present. And I'm not going to read all this, but just so, the point I want to make in quoting this is, they suggest that he says it's not worth wasting education on African Americans, right? That's the quote there. Or that, it's the schools aren't doing any good on them. What they need is a good, whacking with a barrel stave. But his life puts the lie to this, right? And that's what we're going to look at today, is how the evidence shows a very different person. Now, what I think is interesting is they call this an imperfect sketch, and it is outrageously imperfect. But they would say that, but they feel they know him so well. There's hardly any need to bring him back to memory. He's so unforgettable, right? And so I think I want to pick up on this idea of the imperfect sketch and try to say, well, there's much more to this man, and there's a lot of documentation. Actually, incredibly, so much that we can know about Berkeley Bullock beyond what the students think they know and what they tell us. Who is this man behind the imperfect sketch? Well, for one thing, he was a literate, self-educated man. And just to summarize some of the highlights of his life, he freed himself and his mother from slavery. He founded the Ivy Creek, what was called the Old Ivy Creek Church, now the Union Ridge, and this is in the early 20th century, it had changed names to Union Ridge. He sent his children to school, and several became teachers and civic leaders, so he did believe in education for his children. He purchased more than a dozen properties in Albemarle County and the city of Charlottesville. He operated a successful restaurant and ice business, and he co-founded, this is really significant, he co-founded the Piedmont Industrial and Land Improvement Company, organized by colored men for the benefit of the African American community. He was one of the founding members of this collaborative. So you'll learn more about this as we go along. But let's start with his birth. He was born in Louisa